Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western Literary Canon out loud. Today we are picking up where we left off in the previous video. We are up to September 8th of Journal Collection number 29 by Emerson, and the year is 1838, and Emerson is 35 years old. With that said, I'll go ahead and get started. September 8th. That which is individual and remains individual in my experience is of no value. What is fit to engage me, and so engage others permanently, is what has put off its weeds of time and place and personal relation. Therefore, all that befalls me in the way of criticism and extreme blame and praise, drawing me out of equilibrium, putting me for a time in a false position to people, and disallowing the spontaneous sentiments, wastes my time, bereaves me of thoughts, and shuts me up within poor personal considerations. Therefore I hate to be conspicuous for blame or praise. It spoils thought. Henry Thoreau told a good story of Deacon Parkman, who lived in the house he now occupies and kept a store close by. He hung out a salt fish for a sign, and it hung so long and grew so hard, black and deformed, that the deacon forgot what thing it was, and nobody in town knew, but being examined chemically, it proved to be saltfish. But duly every morning the deacon hung it on its peg. September 9th. How attractive is the book in my friend's house, which I should not read in my own. At Waltham I took up Geoffrey, and if they had let me alone an hour, should have read it well. But Goethe, Schleiermacher lie at home unread. Many books are not so good as a few. Once, a youth at college, with what joy and profit I read the Edinburgh Review. Now, a man, the Edinburgh Review, and Heeren, and Blackwood, and Goethe get a languid attention. September 10th. Fancy relates to color, imagination to form. Stetson, talking of Webster this morning, says, "He commits great sins sometimes, but without any guilt." How is a boy, a girl, the master, the mistress of society, independent, irresponsible? Gore Ripley, for example, or A.P., or any other, looks out from his corner on such people and facts as pass by, tries and sentences them on their merits as good, bad, interesting, silly, eloquent, troublesome. Teachers' meetings everywhere are disturbed by the question whether any sin can be repented of so as to place the sinner where he had been if he had not sinned at all. The question is answered by the consideration of the nature of spirit. It is one and not manifold. When God returns and enters into a man, he does hallow him wholly, and in bringing him one good, brings him all good. September 12th. Yesterday, the Middlesex Association met here with 2 or 3 old friends beside. Yet talking this morning in detail with 2 friends of the proposition often made of a journal to meet the wants of the time, it seemed melancholy as soon as it came to the details. Alcott wants a historical record of conversations holden by you and me and him. I say, how joyful rather is some Montaigne's book, which is full of fun, poetry, business, divinity, philosophy, anecdote, smut, which dealing of bone and marrow, of corn barn and flour barrel, of wife and friend and valet, of things nearest and next, never names names or gives you the glooms of a recent date or relation, but hangs there in the heaven of letters, unrelated, untimed, a joy and a sign, an autumnal star. A sermon, my own, I read never with joy, though sincerely written. An oration, a poem, another's or my own, I read with joy. Is it that from the first species of writing we cannot banish tradition, convention, and that the last is more easily genuine? Or is it that the last being dedicated to beauty, and the first to goodness, to duty, the spirit flies with hilarity and delight to the last, with domestic obligation and observance only to the first? Or is it that the sentiment of duty and the divinity shun demonstration and do retreat into silence, They would pervade all, but they would not be unfolded, exhibited apart, and as a matter of science. September 13th. License. Consider that always a license attends reformation. We say your actions are not registered in a book by a recording angel for an invisible king. Action number 1, number 2, up to number 1,000,000. But the retribution that shall be is the same retribution that now is. Base action makes you base, holy action hallows you. Instantly the man is relieved from a terror that girded him like a belt, has lost the energy that terror gave him, and when now the temptation is strong, he will taste the sin and know. Now I hate the loss of the tonic. The end is so valuable. To have escaped the degradation of a crime is in itself so pure a benefit that I should not be very scrupulous as to the means. I would thank any blunder, any sleep, any bigot, any fool that misled me into such a good. And yet, as William Henry Channing said yesterday in reply to my remark, there is a certain intimation that joy is the home of the mind in this new license. The analogous evil may be seen in literature. We say now with Wordsworth to the scholar, "Leave your old books, come forth into the light of things, let nature be your teacher, out upon your pedantic cartloads of grammars and dictionaries and archaeologies. The now is all." Instantly the indolence and self-indulgence of the scholar is armed with an apology. Tush, I will have a good time. Culture. A cheerful face makes society. A cheerful, intelligent face shows the present end of nature and education answered. A sour face, a waiting face, dissatisfaction, unrest. Impatience of the rain, of the company, suspense, care, betray imperfect culture or uncultivation. Cannot a man have so various parts of his nature unfolded that he shall have a resource when conversation flags and dull men come, and there are no books or letters? Cannot he play? Can he not be domestical and affectionate, and crack nuts and jokes? It is easy enough for a firm man who knows the world to brook the rage of the cultivated classes, yet it is difficult not to be affected by sour faces. Sympathy is a supporting atmosphere, and in it we unfold easily and well. But climb into this thin, iced, difficult air of Andes of reform, and sympathy leaves you, and hatred comes. The state is so new and strange and unpleasing that a man will, maugre all his resolutions, lose his sweetness and his flesh. He will pine and fret. The person that has acted fears. The person that looks on is formidable. The silken persecution. Martyrs with thumbscrews, martyrs sawn asunder, martyrs eaten by dogs, may claim with gory stumps a crown. But the martyrs in silk stockings and barouches with venison and champagne, and ballrooms and picture galleries make me sick, self-pitying. After 30, a man is too sensible of the strait limitations which his physical constitution sets to his activity. The stream feels its banks which it had forgotten, and the run and overflow of the first meadows. True science. I do not wish to know that my shell is the strombus or my moth of Vanessa, but I wish to unite the shell and the moth to my being. September 15th. A disinclination to society will keep out more visitors than a good bolt. I please myself with the thought that my accidental freedom by means of a permanent income is no wise essential to my habits, that my tastes, my direction of thought is so strong that I should do the same things, should contrive to spend the best part of my time in the same way as now, rich or poor. If I did not think so, I should never dare to urge the doctrines of human culture on young men. The farmer, the laborer, has the extreme satisfaction of seeing that the same livelihood he earns is within reach of every man. The lawyer, the author, the singer has not. Society seems to have lost all remembrance of the irresponsibility of a writer on human and divine nature. They forget that he is only a reporter, and not at all accountable for the fact he reports. If, in the best use of my eyes, I see not something which people say is there, and see somewhat which they do not say is there, instantly they call me to account as if I had unmade or made the things spoken of. They seem to say society is in conspiracy to maintain such and such propositions, and woe betide you if you blab. This diffidence of society in authors seems to show that it has very little experience of any true observers, of any who did not mix up their personality with their record. The Arabs of the desert would not forgive Belzoni with his spyglass for bringing their camp near to him. Not the fact avails, but the use you make of it. People would stare to know on what slight single observations those laws were inferred, which wise men promulgate and which society receives later and writes down as canons. A single flute heard out of a village window, a single prevailing strain of a village maid, will teach a susceptible man as much as others learn from the orchestra of the academy. One book as good as the Baudeline library. I have learned in my own practice to take advantage of the aforesaid otherism that makes other people's bread and butter taste better than our own, and books read better elsewhere than at home. And now, if I cannot read my German book, I take it into the wood, and there a few sentences have nothing lumpish, but the same is transparent and broad, and when I come back I can proceed with better heart. So in traveling, how grateful at taverns is Goethe. September 16th. Dr. Ripley prays, quote, that the lightning may not lick up our spirits, end quote. Mr. Frost said very happily in today's sermon, quote, we see God in nature as we see the soul of our friend in his countenance, end quote. You must read a great book to know how poor are all books. Shakespeare suggests a wealth that beggars his own. It does seem as if history gave no intimation of any society in which despondency came so readily to heart as we see it and feel it in ours. Young men, young women at 30 and even earlier seem to have lost all spring and vivacity, and if they fail in their first enterprise, the rest is rock and shallow. Is the stoic and the soul dead in these late stages? I cannot understand it. Our people are surrounded with greater external prosperity and general well-being than Indians or Saxons, more resources, outlets, asylums, yet we are sad, and these were not. Why should it be? Has not reflection any remedy for her own diseases? Assume the immortality. Say boldly, there is no trifle. I see before me the bended horizon. There hangs on high a lovely purple cloud. I accept these sublime pledges by which creative love and wisdom yet speak to you and say to you, I am. The memory assures me I have lived. Nature affirms that God is still with me. Then how can I doubt that as good and fair things remain for me as I yet have known? Sadness is always the comparison of the idea with the act. Sunday Eve. I went at sundown to the top of Dr. Ripley's hill and renewed my vows to the genius of that place. Somewhat of awe, somewhat grand and solemn mingles with the beauty that shines afar around. In the west, where the sun was sinking behind clouds, one pit of splendor lay as in a desert of space, a deposit of still light not radiant. Then I beheld the river, like God's love, journeying out of the gray past on into the green future. Yet sweet and native as all those fair impressions on that summit fall on the eye and ear, they are not yet mine. I cannot tell why I should feel myself such a stranger in nature. I am a tangent to their sphere, and do not lie level with this beauty. And yet the dictate of the hour is to forget all I have mislearned, to cease from man, and to cast myself into the vast mold of nature. A stranger. It is singular how slight and indescribable are the tokens by which we anticipate the qualities of sanity, of prudence, of probity, in the countenance of a stranger. We see with a certain degree of terror the new physique of a foreign man, as a Japanese, a New Zealander, a Calabrian. In a new country, how should we look at a large Indian moving in the landscape on his own errand? He would be to us as a lion or a wild elephant. In such proximity stand the virtues and defects of character that a disgust at some foible will blind men oftener to a grandeur in the same soul. In describing the character of his wife, a man may even omit to name a sensibility which is the costliest of attributes, which gives the person who hath it an universal life, and mirrors all nature in her face. Is not the vast an element in man? Yet what teaching or book of today appeals to the vast? When the preacher begins to talk of miracles, I think immediately of the Capuchins. The mural crown for an argument, the triumphal crown for one just and noble image. Pericles was not yet ready. To keep order and to give him time, a man of business was in the rostrum mumbling long initial statements of the facts before the people and the state of Greek affairs. After what seemed a very long time, the people grew nervous and noisy, and at a movement behind him, he sat down. Pericles arose and occupied the rostrum. His voice was like the stroke of a silver shield, a cold mathematical statement warmed by imperceptible degrees into earnest announcements of a heroic soul. He conversed with the people, he told stories, he enumerated names and dates and particulars, he played, he joked, though coldly and reservedly, as it seemed to me. Then, having thus, as it seemed, drawn his breath and made himself master of his place and work, he began to deal out his thoughts to the people. The conclusions of his periods were like far-rattling storms. Every word was a ball of fire. September 18th. A stranger. What is the meaning of that? The fork falling sticks upright in the floor, and the children say, "A stranger is coming." A stranger is expected or announced, and an uneasiness betwixt pleasure and pain invades all the hearts of a household. Housekeeping. If my garden had only made me acquainted with the muckworm, the bugs, the grasses, and the swamp of plenty in August, I should willingly pay a free tuition. But every process is lucrative to me beyond its economy. For the like reason keep house. Whoso does, opens a shop in the heart of all trades, professions, and arts, so that upon him these shall all play. By keeping house, I go to an universal school where all knowledges are taught me, and the price of tuition is my annual expense. Thus, I want my stove set up. I only want a piece of sheet iron 31 inches by 33. But that want entitles me to call on the professors of tin and iron in the village, Messrs. Wilson and Dean, and inquire of them the kinds of iron they have or can procure, the cost of production of a pound of cast or wrought metal, and any other related information they possess, and furthermore to lead the conversation to the practical experiment of the use of their apparatus for the benefit of my funnel and blower, all which they courteously do for a small fee. In like manner, I play the chemist with ashes, soap, beer, vinegar, manure, medicines, the naturalist with trees, shrubs, hens, pigs, cows, horses, fishes, bees, cankerworms, wood, and coal, the politicians with the selectmen, the assessors, the probate court, the town meeting. Is not the beauty that piques us in every object, in a straw, an old nail, a cobblestone in the road, the announcement that always our road lies out into nature, and not inward to the wearisome, odious anatomy of ourselves and comparison of me with thee, and accusation of me, and ambition to take this from thee and add it to me? Alcott is a ray of the oldest light, as they say the light of some stars that parted from the orb at the deluge of Noah has only now reached us. Nomads. We are all nomads, and all chimney ornaments by turns, and pretty rapid turns. I fancy the chief difference that gives one man the name of a rover, and one of a fixture, is the faculty of rapid domestication, the power to find his chair and bed everywhere, which one man has, and another has not. In Paris, a man needs not to go home ever. He can find any part of the city his coffee, his dinner, his newspaper, his company, his theater, and his bed as good as those he left. A new degree is taken in scholarship as soon as a man has learned to read in the wood as well as he reads in the study. This afternoon the eclipse. Peter Howell did not like it, for his rowan would not make hay, and he said, "The sun looked as if a nigger was putting his head into it." The people say when you shudder that someone is walking over your grave. They describe and feel a murder and the insults done to a murdered body as a successful revenge, and to pluck out the quivering heart is thought to consummate the harm. They do not see that a man is as much a stranger in his own body as another man is. The nomad and the pivot are two poles quite essential both to the intellectual culture. The intellectual nomadism is the faculty of objectiveness, or of eyes which everywhere feed themselves. Who hath such eyes everywhere falls into true relations to his fellow men. Every man, every object is a prize, a study, a property to him, and this love smooths his brow, joins him to men, and makes him beautiful and beloved in their sight. His house is a wagon, he roams through all latitudes as easily as a Kalmuck. He must meantime abide by his inward law as the Kalmuck by his Khan. We are by nature observers, and so learners. September 19th. I found in the wood this afternoon the drollest mushroom, tall, stately, pretending, upbearing its vast dome as if to say, "Well, I am something. Burst ye beholders, thou luck beholder, with wonder." Its dome was a deep yellow ground with fantastic star-like ornaments richly overwrought, so shabby, genteel, so negro fine, the St. Peter's of the beetles and pismires. Such ostentation in Pt.2 I never did see. I touched the white column with my stick. It nodded like old Troy, and so eagerly recovered the perpendicular as seemed to plead piteously with me not to burst the fabric of its pride. Shall I confess it? I could almost hear my little Waldo at home begging me, as when I have menaced his little blockhouse, and with a little puffball seemed to say, "Don't, papa, pull it down." So after due admiration of this blister, this cupola of midges, I left the little scaramouche alone in its glory. Goodbye, vanity, goodbye, nothing. Certainly there is comedy in the divine mind when these little vegetable self-conceits front the day as well as Newton or Goethe with such impressive emptiness. The greater is the man, the less are books to him. Day by day he lessens the distance between him and his authors, and soon finds very few to whom he can pay so high a compliment as to read them. September 20th. The fact detached is ugly. Replace it in its series of cause and effect, and it is beautiful. Putrefaction is loathsome, but putrefaction seen as a step in the circle of nature pleases. A mean or malicious act vexes me, but if I can raise myself to see how it stands related to past and future in the biography of the doer, it becomes comic, pleasant, fair, and prophetic. The laws of disease are the laws of health masked. All affections to persons are partial and superficial. Aunts. All Peggy heard she deemed exceeding good, but chiefly praised the parts she understood. Jane Taylor. They say Dr. Palfrey lost his countenance once at the baptismal font when the affectionate father whispered in his ear the name of his babe, Jacob Adonis. 'Tis poor fun, but sometimes resistless, odd names, Zephaniah, Tearsheet, Beelzebub Edwards, not the distinguished Beelzebub. Every homely proverb covers a single and grand fact. Two of these are often in my head lately. Every dog has his day, which covers this fact of otherism, or rotation of merits, and there are as many good fish in the sea as ever came out of it, which was Nelson's adage of merit, and all men's of marriage. My third proverb is as deficient in superficial melody as either of the others. The devil is an ass. The seamen use another, which has much true divinity. Every man for himself, and God for us all. September 21st. The equinox. Subjectiveness. I wish I could forget there is any such person as William Channing, said my friend William Henry Channing the other day. Originality. How easy to repeat, how mysteriously problematic to begin an action. To sit upon the merits of Plato, of Voltaire, of Shakespeare, and simply judge them from our station seems very easy when it is done, and as fast as the author names his subjects it is half done. Yet we do it not. Where is Kitty? Teeth. The greatest expression of limitation in the human frame is in the teeth. Thus far, says the face, no farther, says the teeth. I mean that whilst the face of the child expresses an excellent possibility, as soon as he opens his mouth you have an expression of defined qualities. I like him best with his mouth shut. Scale. Man says Goethe loves the unconditional, all or nothing in blame and praise. I like the scale and hate the neglect of the scale, and, as I tell some of my friends who love the superlative, one day an angel will bring them a golden gunter. Inferior nature. The excursions of poetry into lower nature, into the winds, waters, beast, bird, fish, insect, plant tribes, are man taking possession of the world on one side, as the classifications of science are on the other side, and the taming of animals and their economical use on the third side. Tennyson is a beautiful half of a poet. September 22nd. Nature a deist. The thermometer, the microscope, the prism are little deists. They stand like pagans, have a very pagan look when the creed and catechism begin. They are little better than profane, and so a doctor of medicine, a chemist, an astronomer do never remind me of St. Athanasius. September 24th. Nature a resource. Nature is the beautiful asylum to which we look in all the years of striving and conflict as the assured resource when we shall be driven out of society by ennui or chagrin or persecution or defect of character. I say as I go up the hill and through the wood and see the soliciting plants, I care not for you, mosses and lichens, and for you, fugitive birds or secular rocks. Grow, fly, or sleep there in your order, which I know is beautiful though I perceive it not. I am content not to perceive it. Now have I entertainment enough with things nearer, homelier. Things wherein passion enters and hope and fear have not yet become too dangerous, too insipid for me to handle. But by and by, if men shall drive me out, if books have become stale, I see gladly that the door of your palace of magic stands ajar, and my age shall find the antique hermitage, the hairy gown and mossy cell. Nature knowing. Nature is no fool. She knows the world. She has calculated the chances of her success, and if her seeds do not vegetate, she will not be chagrined and bereft. She has another arrow left, another card to play. Her harvest is insured. From her oaks she scatters down 1,000 seeds, and if 900 rot, the forest is still perpetuated for a century. Every man projects his character before him, praises it, worships it. The Indians say the Negro is older than they, and they older than the white man. The Negro is the pre-Adamite, but the great-grandfather of all the races, the oldest inhabitant, seems to be the trilobite. Lablais was a man who never printed a letter, but straightway every country curate must read it, and without saying a word run to his barn, tackle up his old horse and chaise, and take the road to Paris to know what he must think of this. It is of great entertainment to read Goethe's notice of Kepler, Roger Bacon, Galileo, Newton, Voltaire. Yet they consist of the simplest description, almost merely naming of the persons from his point of view. Nothing was easier than to strike them off. It implied no such labor as to write a Faust or an Egmont. Before it is done, one shrinks from such a dark problem as the estimate of a great genius, a Voltaire, a Newton. Yet he has only to address himself to it, to utter the name of the man in a self-contained, self-centered way, and the problem is solved. A religious culture to the intellect of men is needed. The intellect has been irreligious these many years or ages. The antique expresses the moral sentiment without cant. Your turn. Each dog, etc. In childhood and youth, each man has had many checks and censures and thinks modestly enough of his own endowment. When, by and by, he comes to unfold it in propitious circumstance, it fills his eye, and it fills the eye of all. It seems the only talent. He is surprised and delighted with his success, and carries that out also into the infinite, as man will, and accounts himself already the fellow of the great. But he goes into company, into a banking house, into a mob, into a mechanic shop, into a society of scholars, a camp, a ship, a laboratory. And in each new place he is a fool. Other talents take place and rule the hour, and his presumption, cowed and whipped, goes back to the timid condition of the boy. For every talent of man runs out to the horizon as well as his. September 25th. The kiss of the dryads is not soft. The kiss of the oreads is still. A good woodland day or two with John Lewis Russell, who came here and showed me mushrooms, lichens, and mosses, a man in whose mind things stand in the order of cause and effect, and not in the order of a shop or even of a cabinet. Casella sang of love, a song of love that gave us to know and own the natural and the heavenly or divine, that were indeed uplifting music. It seems to me that in the procession of the soul, from within outward, it enlarges its circles ever, like the pebble thrown into the pond, or the light proceeding from an orb. Nature insures herself. Nobody cares for planting the poor fungus, so she shakes down from the gills of one agaric countless spores, any one of which, being preserved, transmits new billions of spores tomorrow or next day. Let the scholar know that the veneration of man always attaches to him who perceives and utters things in the order of cause and effect. The divine soul takes care for heroes. It inspires not only every animal body with sagacity and appetite that shall secure food to its belly, and several individuals in every society with skill to organize social labor, to build the dam, the road, and the boat, to make the law and mend it, but it transcends the zones of appetite and of prudence, and darts into some souls, gleams out of the deeper heaven. So that here came B.R., and said that he never planted anything which he expected to reap except corn. He plants forest trees and arranges improvements of water and land which will be good for children and towns to come. September 28th. Like-minded. Nothing seems so easy as to speak and to be understood. Sickness. Our health is our sound relation to external objects, our sympathy with the external being. A man wakes in the morning sick with fever, and he perceives at once he has lost his just relation to the world. Every sound in the lower parts of the house or in the street falls faint and foreign on his ear. He begins to hear the frigid doom of old obstruction, quote, "Thou shalt have no part in anything that is done under the sun." Famed books. It is always an economy of time to read old and famed books. Order of wonder. If you desire to arrest attention, to surprise, do not give me facts in the order of cause and effect, but drop one or two links in the chain, and give me with a cause and effect 2 or 3 times removed. Apples and men. The St. Michael's pear tree of the present day is a vast forest scattered throughout the gardens of North America and England, yet subject in all the quarters of its dispersion to the diseases incident to the parent stock, and like a disease or an animal race, or any one natural state, it wears out and will have an end. Each race of man resembles an apple or a pear, the Nubian, the Negro, the Tartar, the Greek. He vegetates, thrives, and multiplies, usurps all the soil and nutriment, and so kills the weaker races. He receives all the benefit of culture under many zones and experiments, but his doom was in nature as well as his thrift, and overtakes him at last with the certainty of gravitation. Faction. A foolish formula is the spirit of faction, as it is used in books old and new. Can you not get any nearer to the fact than that, you old granny? It is like the answer of children who, when you ask them the subject of the sermon, say, "It was about religion." Why need you choose? I wrote Margaret Fuller today that, seeing how entirely the value of facts is in the classification of the eye that sees them, I desire to study, I desire longanimity, to use Bacon's word. I verily believe that a philosophy of history is possible out of the materials that litter and stuff the world that would raise the meaning of books and literature. Cause and effect forever, say I. Those old Egyptians built vast temples and halls in some proportion to the globe on which they were erected, and to the number of the nation who were to hold their solemnities within the walls. They built them not in a day nor in a single century. So let us with inveterate purpose write our history. Let us not, as we now do, write a history for display and make it after our own image and likeness, 3 or 4 crude notions of our own, and very many crude notions of old historians, hunted out and patched together without coherence or proportion, and no thought of the necessity of proportion and unity dreamed of by the writer, a great conglomerate, or at the best an arabesque, a grotesque, containing no necessary reason for its being, nor inscribing itself in our memory like the name and life of a friend. But let us go to the facts of chronology, as Newton went to those of physics, knowing well that they are already bound together of old, and perfectly, and he surveys them that he may detect the bond. Let us learn with the patience and affection of a naturalist all the facts, and looking out all the time for the reason that was, for the law that prevailed, and made the facts such, not for one that we can supply and make the facts plausibly sustain. We should then find abundant apricus or lights self-kindled amid the antiquities we explored. Why should not history be godly written out of the highest faith and with a study of what really was? We should then have ideas which could command and marshal the facts and show the history of a nation as accurately proportioned and necessary in every part as an animal. The connection of commerce and religion explains the history of Africa from the beginning until now. Nomadism is a law of nature, and Asia, Africa, Europe present different pictures of it. The architecture of each nation had its root in nature. How ample the materials show, when once we have the true idea that explains all. Then the modern man, the geography, the ruins, the geology, the traditions as well as authentic history, recite and confirm the tale. I said above, cause and effect forever, and the thought that out of such incongruous patchwork, thoughtlessly put together as our histories are, nothing can come but incongruous impressions, obscure, unsatisfactory to the mind, but that views obtained by patient wisdom, dredging amidst facts, would give an analogous impression to the landscape. They say the sublime silent desert now testifies through the mouths of Bruce, Lyon, Calod, Burckhardt to the truth of the calumniated Herodotus. September 29th. I have a full quiver of facts under the Sapphic and Adonian text of every dog, etc. We are ungrateful creatures. There is nothing we value and hunt and cultivate and strive to draw to us, but in some hour we turn and rend it. We sneer at ignorance and the life of the senses, and the ridicule of never thinking, and then goes by a fine girl like M.R., a piece of life, gay because she is happy in making these very commonalities beautiful by the energy and heart with which she does them, and seeing this, straightway we admire and love her and them, say, Lo, a genuine creature of the fair earth, not blasé, not flétrie by books, philosophy, religion, or care, insinuating by these very words a treachery and contempt for all that we had so long loved and wrought in ourselves and others. A note from the editor. Many quotations from the writings of Arnold L. Heeren on Asia and Africa occur in this journal, some of which are used in History and other essays. As nature enforces intercourse among men by putting salt and dates and gold and slaves in the desert, and corn in the fields, and hides on the mountains, and fishes in the sea, and these cannot be had but by going thither where they are, so various circles of society possess facts which cannot be had by the student without repairing to them, and they are people he does not like and cannot approach without preparation. Frenchmen, Italians, Germans, Talleyrand, Esterhazy, Metternich, merchants, lovers of art, owners of picture galleries at home, the physician, and the master mechanics. I once wrote that the most abstract truth is the most practical. See how quickly the whole community is touched by an academical discourse on theism. At an imagined assault of a cardinal truth, the very mud boils. Literary men amuse themselves with speculations which do not go into the abstract and absolute, but linger in the conditional and verbal. Wit, old poetry, old philosophy, mathematics are favorite amusements, for they have no claws, no dangers. Censure and praise. I hate to be defended in a newspaper. As long as all that is said against me, I feel a certain sublime assurance of success, but as soon as honeyed words of praise are spoken for me, I feel as one that lies unprotected before his enemies. Blessed be the wife that in the talk tonight shared no vulgar sentiment, but said, in the gossip and excitement of the hour, be as one blind and deaf to it, know it not, do as if nothing had befallen. And when it was said by the friend, the end is not yet, wait till it is done, she said, it is done in eternity. Blessed be the wife. I, as always, venerate the oracular nature of woman. The sentiment which the man thinks he came unto gradually through the events of years, to his surprise he finds woman dwelling there in the same, as in her native home. This is the end of Part 6 of Journal Collection number 29 by Ralph Waldo Emerson in Volume 5 of the Collected Journals. In the next video, we will pick up where we left off on September 30th of the year 1838. Thank you for listening.